Next letter in the Russian or Cyrillic alphabet is the letter O. O. Nice rounded O sound, at least when it's stressed. In other situations it has a couple other pronunciations, but that doesn't concern us here. So a capital O is really not terribly difficult. Make your O, maybe leave a little hook at the top. In some handouts you might see where they want you to connect it out the bottom. That is simply silly. I don't think anyone actually does that. So a capital O looks something like that. Lowercase o is made just like the uppercase, and in connecting, and if you've been watching some of the other segments here in this video presentation, you'll see that I've used O as an example of a high out connecting letter, such that this little stroke here is how you aim, basically, your connection. So we'll see some examples below, but you'll see that the way to adjust your O is simply by how much you curve this stroke out of the letter. So if you're following along, go ahead and write out some O's on your handout. So lowercase O. Now, for connecting, O is a high in connect letter, so coming off of an A, for instance, which is a low out, coming into an O, which is a high in, I simply draw up into the letter, so an A up into an O, A, O. Now, coming in from a high out connect, let's use the example of our V. V, just like the O, has this adjustable connecting stroke right here. And if we have an O that follows, which is a high in here, we choose this higher option. So my V would come out and just right over into my O, into a word like vot. Vot. So, write out a few O's with a high connecting, high out connect V to an O there. I just drew it straight across. So, this is a high out connect into an O. Now, as we've talked about, connecting out of the O becomes an interesting process. So let's start off with the letter A, which is a high in connect up to here. And so from this point, where my O ends, I just aim the stroke right over to the top. So I get an O into an A. Now, if I have an O into a hooked letter, for instance, we looked at our the L and the M earlier. So I have an O, which ends here, and then I have, let's say, an L, which is always hooked. And so I need to connect from here, which is where my O ends, down to the line with the L. And so what I do is I just aim straight for that line when I come out of the O. So the O comes out, down, all the way up into the hook. And I get an O into a low in, and in fact a hooked letter. Be careful that with your O that you end up with, you need to make sure that you are crossing. So here's the circle. You need to make sure that you're crossing it somehow. Not to confuse your letter with this, which would be an A going into L. And notice that there's nothing crossing over this letter. So if there's nothing crossing it, if I were trying to make an O and just went up and looped down like this, this is in fact an ah and not an O. To get the O, I must cross over. In fact, sometimes people will loop their O way down like that, also an option. The key, though, is that there's some sort of line that goes across the letter like that. So capital O, lowercase o in print, capital O, lowercase o in cursive.